Welcome back. Today we're diving into an expert assessment on something called Western Strategic Fragility. Our mission is to really analyze this subtle shift in daily life that the sources are calling the transactional turn. Can you start us off? What is this turn exactly, and why is it seen as, well, limiting the West's power right now through 2026?
Yeah, it's a crucial place to start because, interestingly, the analysis doesn't begin with, say, tanks or budgets. It starts with how you feel day to day. So the transactional turn, it's basically the shift where relationships could be economic, could be civic. They stop being about long-term trust. Instead, everything gets optimized for, short-term gain and trust. It just gets liquidated in the process.
Okay, so if everyone's just looking out for number one and the institutions we rely on fail to provide that stability, what happens then? Is that where the next big idea comes in? Institutional betrayal?
That's exactly it. Institutional betrayal is, it's when an organization, one you should be able to trust, fails to prevent harm, or fails to respond properly when harm happens. And that just poisons the well, leading to this really corrosive system-wide distrust. All of this, it ends up creating what the experts are terming the national resilience deficit.
A deficit, meaning we just don't have the buffers, like psychologically or even materially.
Precisely. We lack the shock absorbers, you could say, the ability for society to take a major hit, economic, political, whatever, without just fracturing.
So there's a chain reaction here they're worried about. How does this internal feeling, this deficit, translate to problems on the world stage?
Yeah, the sources map it out pretty clearly. It's like a domino effect. Precarity, that feeling of instability, it fuels anxiety. That anxiety then breeds distrust, which leads to political alienation, people checking out. And the end result, geopolitical paralysis, the inability to act decisively.
Okay, let's unpack that first domino. Precarity. The report says this isn't just bad luck, it's structural. Something about an architecture of extraction, like the gig economy.
Right. It's presented as systemic policy choices that are kind of baking precarity into everyday life. Think about that example. They use the freelance coder, maybe doing okay, then suddenly displaced by AI in 2024. Their whole economic reality shifts to what the source calls quiet panic. Stability vanishes, replaced by these constant low-trust transactional gigs. And this isn't just individual stories. It hammers institutional trust. We're talking, over half the global population having little or no trust in their government? And critically, this seems to be getting worse intergenerationally. That's a huge red flag.
Wow. Yeah, that's a massive liability. You can see why some see high-trust places like the Nordics as these sort of safe havens then. Okay, let's zoom in on the next link. Anxiety. The microscopic toll.
Yeah, and this is framed almost as a public health crisis hiding in plain sight. I mean, the numbers are stark. 69% of Americans saying financial uncertainty feeds their depression or anxiety. Think about that. Almost 70%. That's a huge chunk of the population operating with this constant cognitive drain just from money worries.
That's staggering. And what does that chronic stress do to us politically? Does it make us less capable of complex thought?
That's exactly the argument. The sources call it policy myopia. Basically, chronic stress hogs your mental bandwidth. It fuels this preference for easy, immediate answers. Simple solutions feel better than grappling with complex, long-term problems. And there's another piece, housing. When housing becomes just a commodity, it doesn't just make people anxious about rent or mortgages, it destroys social capital. Because if you're constantly precarious, always worried about the next bill or having to move, you lose the ability or maybe the energy to offer reciprocity. That give and take that builds strong communities and social networks. It just evaporates.
Okay, so people feel anxious, disconnected. And the sources say this creates an opening. It fuels strongman magnetism.
It seems to create fertile ground, yes. Populist leaders often step in offering something very appealing in that environment. A clear, structured sense of belonging. Certainty. They basically say, things are confusing, I'll make it simple, join us. It replaces that fragmented feeling. And if you pan out, you see this contrast. Western fragmentation, think sluggish euro area growth, fragile leadership in key countries versus, say, autocratic cohesion, places prioritizing national security, offering stability, even if it's without pluralism.
And it's not just abstract. This anxiety, this precarity, it even affects, the military, our defense structure.
Right. The analysis connects those dots, too. Financial strain hits military families, hard housing costs near bases, difficulty for spouses finding stable work. It shows how this internal fragility, this precarity felt by ordinary people, directly impacts the foundations of national security. It is the strategic fragility.
So, faced with this chain reaction, precarity to anxiety to paralysis, what's a top priority fix? the tier 1 recommendation. How do we break the cycle?
The most urgent thing, according to the sources, is to target that first link. Precarity leading to anxiety. Interrupt it directly. They argue for treating financial stress relief as a public health policy, specifically things like mandatory access to debt counseling. It's not just about money. It's about rebuilding a baseline of functional trust, showing that the system can offer some support.
So the big takeaway seems to be, it's the internal state, the sort of emotional and financial exhaustion of citizens, that's the real bottleneck for the West's geopolitical strength through 2026. It's not just about external threats, it's about us, inside.
Exactly. And the sources suggest the solution isn't just tweaking policies, not just technocratic fixes. It requires something deeper, a renewal of purpose.
Yeah.
It really puts the choice starkly. Democracy's survival might depend on whether we choose to actively rebuild trust or just let it fade. So maybe the question for you listening is this. If resilience starts locally, what's one simple daily action you could take to restore a bit of that reciprocity, that local trust, right where you live, something to think about?